We had the best time doing the initial breakdown of the body language and behavior in this video, and we decided we'd revisit some of our favorite moments from it.
Made it possible to do comprehensive lab tests from a prick from the finger and to eliminate the tubes and tubes of blood.
Yeah.
In retrospect, when you look at where you are today, one test with the prick of blood, wasn't that going too far?
So we have developed hundreds of tests over the course of the last 12 years that can run a tiny sample using proprietary Theranos technology. And part of, when I talk about communicating, what we need to do is we need to get that data out there. And I've talked publicly over the course of the last couple of weeks that we've made a decision now to take the data that we've generated for our FDA submissions and put it into the public domain, and we will. But since you're focused on the one test, let's talk about why we're doing that.
And by the way, it's not just me that was focused on the one test. That was sort of the story. The Theranos story was all about this one pinprick that would let you do comprehensive blood testing.
Yeah.
That was the story.
Yeah, well, I think this is what we sort of need to dissect a little bit. So when you look at Theranos, Theranos makes devices. We make chemistries, we make consumables, we make software, and we have a little tube called a nanotainer.
All right, Greg, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll leave you put lotion on your skin to you. I'll just leave that one alone for a minute. But so what I'll start here, she's got something in common with Chris, what was Chris's name? Chris Watts, right?
Watts.
Yeah, she's got something in common with Chris Watts. He had the sway rate. I'm going to coin a new phrase. She's got the head bob rate. If you watch her, this is going to be a great indicator as you see stress in her. Her fight or flight causes her to move her head more, shorter strokes, moving her head more rapidly. So you'll see that coming up as we go through this. She does way too much eye contact. Everybody makes comments about that, like she's staring you down, and very low blink rate. Her blink rate increases when she gets in a bind a bit, but she does what Scott and I have referred to as romancer, where she's staring you right in the eyes to make sure how you're receiving everything when she's telling you something. And I don't have to say this. Everybody who watches this show knows what chaff and redirect are. She is a master chaff and redirector. There are three kinds of CEOs, really. When you get CEOs in front of an audience, there's the silent guy who's only going to answer exactly what it is that you ask because they're not going to divulge any information. That's not her. There is the CEO who does chaff and redirect, where they just blurt out a lot of stuff until you pick up on something and run. That's her. And then there's the third one, and I think Dr. Phil called it CEO-itis when I was talking to him, or we were talking to him. He said, they'll sit there, and if you ask them the question 3 times, by the third time, they'll have figured out what the answer is, and they'll answer it for you. And that was his biggest coaching thing with them. And you do see it. But watch her bobbing her head. Her chin drops down, and she breaks eye contact when he starts to attack her for the one test. Then she starts to chaff and redirect, and when she realizes he's not going to say anything, she just keeps chaffing. She goes to a fairly normal blink rate, and her hands illustrate when she has content that she's certain of and she's going to deliver. You'll notice that head bobbing slows when she does that, speeds up when she's nervous. So that's where we go. I also will notice, Chase, you're going to talk about pronouns. When she says I, she means something she's done standing in front of an audience. When she says we, she means the collective and everything they've done. And she's pretty consistent with those pronouns throughout here. So, Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with you, especially on the head movement there, which we're going to talk about in a future video. I think it becomes something it's almost ad nauseum at that point. The only smiles that we see are when she's speaking in a way that makes her look good. And I think this is because she wants to be seen as some kind of a visionary, and not just from this one clip, but from all of her interactions. There's some very solid characteristics. If I were looking at someone like this, I would say that there is some severe narcissistic behavior. And of course, this is not a diagnosis, but this deliberately fake, deep voice is really strange. And I think narcissists narcissism is rooted in insecurity. So it's feeling like my normal self is not good enough. I need to become something better, and I need to gain my title of being the best. That can only come from other people. That cannot come from within a narcissist. It has to be confirmed from outside of them. So it's interesting that everything is fake. Everything is artificial. And there's two factors that come in here from the DSM. We're going to be talking a lot about the psychology of narcissism here tonight, but there's grandiosity and superficial charm, or what they call glibness in some of these diagnostic criteria. And there's even paranoia in here, which would suggest something different, which I guarantee you Scott's going to talk about in a bit. And she's even admitted to it. She's logged into her employees' private data, looking at their accounts, cameras all over the place. There's bulletproof glass in her office. There's bodyguards, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm just going to stop there. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, man. This is one of my favorites so far because it's in two of my wheelhouses: psychopathy and startups. So, and a lot of psychopaths end up being CEOs. You know, we come to find out. Not that all of them are. If you got lawyers, hold on over there. I'm not saying you are. I'm not pointing anybody out, but it just so happens there are a lot of them in there. Right out of the gate, she's overselling with that body language, man. She's nervous because she knows this guy, his delivery is so just slow and just ding, ding. She knows she's going to be in a little bit of trouble. So she starts this thing where she's trying to make everything okay. But you guys nailed this so far. She got that head to bobbing, the body moving around, and that sort of gets your attention off of what she's saying as she's trying to get you to agree with her. And what she does is this classic setup she does when she sits down. She crosses her leg, bottom part of her leg as an adapter, which we'll see here in a little while. And again, she uses we a lot when she's talking about all the things that the company has done. But then she gets down to a lot of eyes here. I just winked. I can't believe I'm a winker. Anyway, she gets down to a lot of eyes in a few minutes, just talking about her and these. She's trying to talk low and she's trying to talk loud. And when you talk loud, more air comes out and your voice is going to go higher. So it sounds odd because you're still trying to keep it low. You'll realize what that as we go through this, and you make comparisons about what she sounds like now when her voice is about in the middle, and then we're going to hear what she's talking really low. So this is a freak show as we go along. She doesn't answer the questions yes or no. She never says yes or no. Never once does she do that in here. And you're right, Greg. Just the master of chaff and redirect. What else? She's got this thing. That I'm going to call the protective slouch. The more trouble she gets in, the more she sees she's in trouble, the smaller she gets. When someone's getting ready to rob someplace, they're getting ready to steal something, or they're sneaking around, they'll make themselves smaller. A lot of times we'll call it turtling because their head will go down, and their shoulders will come up. In this case, she's just her posture just gets horrendous. And this is just like she turns almost into the hunchback woman. And we'll see it even more as we go along. She starts out tall and she starts getting smaller and smaller. She goes along and keeps feeding what she knows is not true. I'm going to leave it right there. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so she's raised a chair up, so she has height dominance over this person, and so part of her slouch is to try and redress some of that height dominance. I think at times we will see her later kind of straighten up. Often when her interviewer straightens up as well, as some kind of battle commences. Some of the organization of business can be, from many people's point of view, fairly antisocial and cause antisocial behavior. And therefore, sometimes it's not the personality of the person involved, it's the structure around them that causes the impression of psychopathy. Now, in her particular case, it's not fashionable to be wearing a polo neck at this point. That was fashionable back in the kind of, as I remember it, kind of the early 90s, I think. And the CEO of Apple was wearing polo necks, and she's mirroring that kind of look. Well, why? Because there aren't at this point in Silicon Valley, there aren't a lot of good examples and role models to go, yeah, absolutely. Perfect. You too can look like a billionaire Silicon Valley titan of industry. Well, understand, she is being a titan at this point. She's the youngest female billionaire on paper within Silicon Valley at the moment. She is quite unique. So just like females in the past who get into that position, she has lowered her voice. This is not abnormal. Margaret Thatcher, great example. Lowered her voice, right? You always love it when I do Thatcher impersonation, and there she is. In all her glory. So she's lowered her voice. She's aggressive. The head is tilted down. lots of press down of the finger, lots of hands down. So a lot of what I'm seeing, I think, is not actually particularly abnormal for somebody at her power level who's new to it, or CEOs in general. There, that's all I got for you. That was quite long, wasn't it?
Oh, that's good.
We have made it possible to do comprehensive lab tests from a prick from the finger and to eliminate the tubes and tubes of blood.
Yeah.
In retrospect, when you look at where you are today, one test with the prick of blood, wasn't that going too far?
So we have developed hundreds of tests over the course of the last 12 years that can run a tiny sample using proprietary Theranos technology. And part of when I talk about communicating, what we need to do is we need to get that data out there. And I've talked publicly over the course of the last couple of weeks that we've made a decision now to take the data that we've generated for our FDA submissions and put it into the public domain, and we will. But since you're focused on the one test, let's talk about why we're doing that.
And by the way, it's not just me that was focused on the one test. That was sort of the story. The Theranos story was all about this one pinprick that would let you do comprehensive blood testing.
Yeah.
That was the story.
Yeah, well, I think this is what we sort of need to dissect a little bit. So when you look at Theranos, Theranos makes devices. We make chemistries, we make consumables, we make software, and we have a little tube called a nanotainer. Which
Good.
All right.
This has nothing to do with our tests.
Now you're confusing me. How many tests are you doing right now from a simple pinprick as you described in that TED Talk?
Yeah, so right now, just because of this FDA transition, we're only doing one.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that we don't have the technology to do them or that we haven't done them in the past.
And are you confident that you will get the FDA approval to do the 200 that are a standard part of the draw?
Well, so there's multiple parts to this. One is the validation of those tests under the lab framework. The other one is the FDA submission, and this is an area of evolving policy that we're working to create a leadership position in. We've never talked publicly about what the status of what we're doing with FDA is because we just hadn't felt that was appropriate until we got into all of this recent press communications. But we're incredibly confident in the data that we've submitted to the agency. We've worked on it for 2 years. And we've met the standard of comparing our tubes to vacutainers, which are the big tubes that come from the arm. And we're hopeful that we'll see those.
So you feel confident that that vision you laid out 9 months ago will still happen, that you'll be able to do comprehensive tests from a single prick?
Absolutely, and we've done it in the past, and we're going to continue to do it in the future.
All right. Chase, what do you got?
This nonstop head nodding. I want you to watch while she's being asked the question, and her head never stops moving. This is her nervous gesture, but I think this is a habitual thing that she's developed to interact with people and to just gain some kind of rapport and get somebody on board. She's been very good at getting somebody on board. And I think that the way she's able to dupe all of these investors was to get a couple of big fish and let their credibility speak for itself. But she had to get them. She still had to get a couple of people. And I think this is one of those behaviors that she learned, which is extremely unusual behavior. She throws up a stop gesture. And a stop gesture is when all of your fingers extend, even if you're like making food in the kitchen, you're listening to this in the background, just try it out. If your fingers stretch out all the way, that's what's going to happen if you're trying to stop someone from doing something. Hands will extend outward when we're trying to talk someone out of something or get them to stop there and what's not present there. And she's making this like container shape with her hands to illustrate these different levels or these different parts. And it shows she's most likely a kinesthetic person, which she uses feeling words, which would be like if I was interrogating her, I would start transitioning into constructing my language that way. But she continues to use these team pronouns of us, our, we. It's interesting. I want you to see when she starts using self-referential pronouns and exactly precisely pronouns when they're speaking about something they don't want to fully own. And yes, CEOs are going to do this all the time. But when they're asked direct questions about themselves, this was a direct question about her personally. and she starts answering with team pronouns, that's when it becomes unusual. When she says we're hopeful, her hand kind of tosses out. And when she finally confirms that she's confident about it, she says the words absolutely, and she's shaking her head no.
Absolutely.
It is a good data point here because we have established a baseline. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So I think, that there is this agreement behavior, just as you say there, Chase, which I think she has evolved. She's learned. She may have been trained a little bit as well in, how do you get people on board? But it is so consistent and so over the top. And I think, ultimately, I think as you were saying, Greg and Scott and Chase, it's going to evolve into, I think, almost a self-soothing gesture. In the end, it's so consistent and ramps up. Use of the detailed finger gestures there, just nice to see. It's a great one to be able to use. Let people know, look how big my brain is. Because monkeys can't do that. Monkeys can do this. So the moment you start being more detailed with your fingers, the brain kind of sparks up in the neocortex for your audience, and they get really interested in what you're doing. So again, it's a nice way to convince people, is to be really delicate and fine with those gestures. Hyperbole, exaggeration in there, which potentially could speak to business speak, but also speak to potential narcissism, psychopathy. It's one of the elements that you might look for in both of those, because she says, this is there's multiple parts to this.
So there's multiple parts to this.
Then she comes up with two parts.
One is the validation of those tests under the lab framework. The other one is the FDA submission.
So it's a multiple of two then, isn't it? There was only one part we thought, and there's another part. I would say multiple parts would be like potentially 3 or more. I'd be looking for 5, just to kind of build it out a little bit. No, multiple parts, 2. So that I'd say is hyperbole. And then she goes in an element of it, hopeful.
And we're hopeful.
There's a little gap, then an we don't see from her very much during this. And we get a little kind of micro duck of the head on that. Can't remember what the question is, but I think it's about the veracity of the results that they get or the technology. Hopefully, duck of the head. At that point, I would be going short on this stock. It's not a public company, so I'd have no way of doing this. It's all private investors. So, ultimately, this is not really hurting the public as investors. It's incredibly rich families are involved in this. But it is hurting the public in terms of their faith in medical equipment. I think that's the real issue here. Hopeful duck of the head. At that point, I would be going, no, this doesn't look good at all. I don't like what I'm seeing there. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, so start off by saying even the interviewer sees her sleight of hand in her chaff and redirect. So he starts to put her on notice. And he says, you're confusing me with, and her head bob rate starts to increase. So I teach people that when you're listening to an argument, if you nod quietly, the person will divulge information. I don't teach. We always say the organism does what makes the organism successful. She rose to prominence by being among people and persuading them. Now, with the right experts, then I'm an expert too. And people fall for that. It just works that way. If you watch her, when you ask her how many tests, she grips her hand. You also watch that her hands only come up and speak when she is certain of what she's going to say. Her hands stop otherwise. Chase, I love the fact you caught her doing absolutely when she says that only for negative things otherwise. And you can see that she's falling apart there. She's doing this romancer thing we talk about by staring you right in the eyes as she dumps a lot of chaff. And then her head does become an illustrator. One of the few times she uses her head to make her point when she's talking about the FDA. She is shrinking. To your point, Scott, she's shrinking in that chair and getting smaller and smaller by the minute. And she's using something that I call insulator, or we call insulator in the True Crime Workshop, because she is using jargon that you have to dissect. She's talking about micro-containers and vacuum containers, whatever she's talking about there.
We've met the standard of comparing our tubes to vacuum-tainers, which are the big tubes that come from the arm.
She's using that not only as a piece of jargon, but she even explains what she means by it, just so that she can burn up more airtime. This is a way for her to burn up space. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, I've been in business a long time and worked with a lot of business leaders. Words like hopeful, believe, I always say to people who are leaders, those are church words, not business words. Think, know, understand are business words. So anytime I hear those from somebody, and all the way from teaching project managers, all the way up to partners who are CEOs and that, I would say, don't use those words. Those do not instill confidence. So that's what I see. I would not believe her. And I'm with you, Mark. I would have been like, hold on, red flag, red flag. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, she feels the noose tightening at this point. So she's getting, as she gets a little bit more stress, and this guy's a little bit loud, that voice starts, that throat starts to constrict a little bit, and she's trying to keep it low, but it's staying in the middle, and it's what makes her voice sound so odd at this point. And she starts adapting using that ankle. And her regulator, you're right, Jason, she comes out and puts that hang on a minute, trying to get control of what's going on because it's getting away from her. She's bobbing and weaving at this point. Now they're small. Her illustrators are small when she gets into that because of the FDA transition and all that. They get really small because she's thinking, how am I going to get out of this? I can't believe anybody would buy this at this. I mean, I train people how to look for this when they're talking to entrepreneurs, the VCs that are all going and watch for this. And I've trained somebody. I can't believe that she got past this, which makes me think there's other people with her. It's not just her. There's other people that have helped make this happen, knowing it was at the same time. They had to have known that. Again, you guys are right. Like the Wicked Witch of the West, man, she's getting smaller and smaller as she goes along. In the second half, her illustrators are big again, and she's and she comes out and after that second question, swinging for the damn fences, man. She's coming on hard with that. She's just going for it. But her barrier arm and that thing stays strong. She's right there, barriered in, and she's going with it. So I cannot believe somebody would believe this. Of course, we know what to look for, but still, I know for a fact there are people like us that help VCs look at these people. I can't believe that she got this far with this. I'm dumbfounded by this, and anybody would believe it. Even hearing it now, somebody didn't stand up in the audience and go, "Hey, wait a minute, man! There's no way you could." I can't believe that didn't happen. I can't believe. What are you going to say, Greg?
Yeah, so a few things. We're using a lot of language in here, assuming that everyone knows what we're talking about. Illustrators. I'm illustrating and punctuating what my brain is thinking, either word, phrase, or thought. Barriers. I'm putting something between me and you. Adapters, I'm rubbing my hands, I'm gripping my leg, I'm doing that. And then finally, regulators, and you're going to see her use them a lot. Regulators, stop, hold on, wait, go ahead, speed up, stop, all those kinds of things that we use. So those four things, guys, we need to remind everybody, because not everyone has watched us many times. All you new subscribers, this is for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, please subscribe. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe.
This has nothing to do with
now you're confusing me. How many tests are you doing right now from a simple pinprick as you described in that TED Talk?
Yeah, so right now, just because of this FDA transition, we're only doing one.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that we don't have the technology to do them or that we haven't done them in the past.
And are you confident that you will get the FDA approval to do the 200 that are a standard part of the draw?
Framework. The other one is the FDA submission, and this is an area of evolving policy that we're working to create a leadership position in. We've never talked publicly about what the status of what we're doing with FDA is, because we just hadn't felt that was appropriate until we got into all of this recent press communications. But we're incredibly confident in the data that we've submitted to the agency. We've worked on it for 2 years, and we've met the standard of comparing our tubes to vacutainers, which are the big tubes that come from the arm. And we're hopeful that we'll see those.
So you feel confident that vision you laid out 9 months ago will still happen, that you'll be able to do comprehensive tests from a single prick?
Absolutely, and we've done it in the past, and we're going to continue to do it in the future.
So if I went to one of the centers and I got a pinprick, and I only gave that much blood, right? What tests are you currently able to perform?
Is not commercially available.
Okay.
Right now, because we're at a moment in time in which we've decided to transition from the lab framework to the FDA framework. I think about this kind of like if you have cars driving on a road and you say, okay, I'm going to take everybody from driving on the right-hand side of the road to the left-hand side of the road. The only way to do that is to pause right?
Okay.
Cut over. And so as a result, because we have voluntarily decided not to use our nanotainer tubes until we cut over to the left-hand side of the road, which we now have the FDA quality systems in place to do this, we are not collecting the finger stick sample for anything except for HSV. That has nothing to do with what we can run on our devices in our lab. It has nothing to do with our tests. It has nothing to do with our testing methodology or the accuracy or performance of it.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I'm just going to say two things here. A lot of suppression gestures now, which I think you guys would call regulators, and I would call moderators, because these specific regulators are about her moderating the conversation and just saying, look, stop that. I think she's really on the back foot now. She wants this to stop, because he's been really specific about that. He's literally going, well, if I get a pin and I prick and a little bit of blood, like, what can you actually do with that? He's managed to narrow it down. And so she's now got to explode it up now, got to reject his premise and explode it up into some kind of word lasagna in order that we won't be able to see where the lies are, essentially. So lots of nods, lots of looks to approval, nothing new there. The only other thing I'd say is there's a lovely, for her, quite big downturn of the mouth right at the end of this. I think she spends a lot of time serving up this word lasagna, and at the end of it, she's like, oh, that was... I don't think she's pleased with herself at the end of this one. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, that last one, I'm with you. It's in my notes. There's a change in her mouth at the end that is uncharacteristic, and there's a request for approval at the same time. Kind of that. So you can't miss that she knows she's not delivered well there. She starts off, if you notice her head movement here, remember I talked about frequency, but also how much movement she has. The amount of movement is much lighter and much more rapid. So that's an indicator. As you said, it's an adapter. It's a way to release nervous energy. And so she's really nervous, and frequency is moving up, and the amount she's moving her head has decreased. I love the fact she picks up his word, anchors, and chaffs like nobody's business, meaning when we say chaff and redirect, we mean like a plane spraying all this chaff out the back to make a missile follow. He says something, she picks up on a word, commercially available, or a term, and she runs away with it.
Commercially available lab equipment.
So we have never used commercially available lab equipment for fingerstick-based tests.
Okay.
Every fingerstick test that we have ever done uses proprietary Theranos technology that is not commercially available.
And when she does that, in fact, she does a little lip grip when she says commercially available, which means withholding information or emotion. As she gets to the message and she gets down into this chaff and redirect, then her hands start to come up and she starts to talk. She does a two-handed defense. She's doing regulators, as you were saying, Mark, to control a conversation. My favorite is I'm going to regulate you and point out how good I am at the same time. That's one of my favorites I've seen in a long time. That's a hell of a lot of arrogance to do that to somebody. When you put your hand in someone's face and then talk about yourself, that's a hell of a lot of arrogance. And that's what I got. Chase, what do you got?
Oh, wow.
I thought you were going to go to profundity.
Oh, man, I was waiting on that.
Good. I was getting so good about not doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, Scott. I know you have to edit all this out.
Oh, yeah.
You think I'm going to edit that out?
Maybe.
It's not going anywhere, especially since you said it.
All right. This nodding that she's doing is killing me. I can't take this nodding behavior. So one thing that we see here is she is acting like a nano explainer and not just a nanotainer. That didn't even get Scott.
I think just carry on and see how long you can possibly hold that.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Call his bluff.
So one thing we're seeing here that you're not going to see in a lot of the other videos is immediate mouth closure after the statement. The statement's over and the mouth closes within 1/10 of a second. And she continues to dig deeper here. There's a baton gesture, which, Greg, I'm not sure what you guys call that. I know you're on mute, and Scott's frozen.
Or pseudo-frozen. Yeah, Illustrator, but a baton is a function of Illustrator. Yeah.
So a baton is when we talk and our hand is at the accentuation or the right at the syllable of what we're saying. And there's a baton gesture on every single syllable here when she starts to answer this.
He's still keep going. Call his bluff. See who crumbles first.
I think it's unusual here that she won't speak for herself. She's turning everything into, this is about the company. This is not about me.
Because we have voluntarily decided not to use our nanotainer tubes until we cut over to the left-hand side of the road, which we now have the FDA quality systems in place to do this. We are not collecting the finger stick sample.
And I think part of this is a diversion of guilt. That if she can make it about them and about everybody there, then she doesn't have to own it if anything ever happens. Because I'm damn sure that she's worried about this coming into light. So right at the end, again, immediate mouth closure with a confirmation glance back to the interviewer, which is not, both of those are not within her normal baseline. Scott, what do you got?
Other than a cramp in your neck.
Wow. No, I just can't see.
Do you want? Shall I call the ambulance?
No, not yet. I got hot chicken waiting up there. That'll wake me up when we're done.
Oh yeah.
All right. This is a huge lie. Her blink rate plummets at this point, and as she goes through this, she shrinks again. She shrinks, and she's using her barriers. She guys covered most everything. And again, I think she's had a lot of help with this because nobody can you can ball face lie to somebody like this if you're a psychopath. If there's something wrong with your amygdala, there's something wrong with your limbic system in there. Here's why I think so. Chase. She can look at somebody and stare at them without blinking like I just did and not feel weird about it. What's coming out of her mouth is just, it's a huge lie. Every bit of it, nothing in there is true. She can't do any of that stuff. And she's looking at this guy dead-eyed and just saying it like it's nothing. It's not bothering her. And having been able to do this to everyone up to this point like that, again, not caring about the health of who knows how many people that this would have affected. They would have found out eventually, obviously. Didn't care about that. But it doesn't bother her. As a psychopath, what happens is your amygdala don't work properly. It doesn't work properly. There's two of them. They're about the size of almonds, and they're about this high up, and you go in about, an inch and a half, and they come down like that, and they're either not working properly, they're not functioning properly, they're missing, or they're damaged. And that's the part of the limbic system that lets you have empathy for people, for little animals, for little children, for other people. When somebody hits their thumb with a hammer, you go, oh gosh, I bet that hurt. They don't have that. So they don't know that it's weird to keep looking at you. That's the psychopathic stare. So when you see someone in a bar and they keep looking at you like this from across the room and don't quit, and it makes you feel weird, it's because it doesn't make them feel weird. They don't know. They can't read the social cues in the room like a normal person can. And she can't read the social cues on this guy as he becomes uncomfortable as she continues to him. And that's a big sign of that for me. That's in the list. You go down there, they can't read. They can read some facial expressions. Fear, they see that. That's the one they cue into. But she's not seeing fear here. She can't read what this guy's doing or what he's thinking or what other people she's talked to are thinking or have thought up to that point. And apparently they were believing her because of what they've mistaken for competence and her not looking away and keep dead-eyeing them at this point. And then you're right there. At the end, she looks like, do you believe me? Everything's kind of changed, like, do you believe me? That kind of face. Yeah, so that's what I got. That's another list of reasons I think we're dealing with a psychopath here.
See, I don't think she answered the question. I don't think she lied.
Can you guys hear my dog having a nightmare back there?
No.
No, he's doing little barks. I thought it was going to ruin you talking. I'm sorry.
Oh no,
Scott, I don't think she told a lie. I think she just avoided answering the question. She didn't say we can do this. She just avoided it.
I agree with you, but she doesn't see the cues on this guy to go. I wonder if she's missing everything. Keep it on the other guy as well. And she nods her head. You know how many times she nods her head coming out of the gate there in that answer? As he's talking to her at the beginning, 58 times. 58
I know
nods.
it's a lot. I'm just watching.
That's a hell. It's just to hold the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Count them. Go back through and count them this time when you watch this back through. 58 times she nods her head.
Yeah.
That's just not normal. None of this is normal.
I think she's feeling stress is the reason she's moving her head.
Yeah, could be. I don't know.
I'm embarrassed. I didn't count. I didn't have a number at all, and you had.
I agree with you. It's a shitload, but
nod count.
Yeah, it's a lot of them. It's a lot of them. All right, is that everybody?
Yep.
Let's move along.
So if I went to one of the centers and I got a pinprick, and I only gave that much blood, right? What tests are you currently able to perform for that blood using anything other than commercially available lab equipment?
So we have never used commercially available lab equipment for fingerstick-based tests.
Okay.
Every fingerstick test that we have ever done uses proprietary Theranos technology that is not commercially available.
Okay.
Right now, because we're at a moment in time in which we've decided to transition from the lab framework to the FDA framework. I think about this kind of like if you have cars driving on a road and you say, okay, I'm going to take everybody from driving on the right-hand side of the road to the left-hand side of the road. The only way to do that is to pause, right?
Okay.
Cut over. And so as a result, because we have voluntarily decided not to use our nanotainer tubes until we cut over to the left-hand side of the road, which we now have the FDA quality systems in place to do this. We are not collecting the fingerstick sample for anything except for HSV. That has nothing to do with what we can run on our devices in our lab.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with our tests. It has nothing to do with our testing methodology or the accuracy or performance of it.
So what do you got?